Standing in Downing Street for the first time as Prime Minister, Boris Johnson promised the British people that Brexit will be dealt with in 99 days. Branding his critics as doomsters, he said those who bet against Britain would lose their shirts. This evening, Mr Johnson has cleared out more than half of Theresa May's cabinet. His new cabinet is taking shape now, right behind me. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, is with me now. Gary, what do we learn from this speech?
Well, that he's a man in a hurry. You just said 99 days. He thought this was going to fall into his lap 3 years ago, straight after the referendum. The timetable is now extremely tight. We also learnt he's not necessarily going to change the way he speaks in office. None of the normal language of a Prime Minister there, normal sort of columnist's demotic that we've grown used to from Boris Johnson. But we also learnt that he's laying out here the battle lines potentially for a general election. There was a lot of politics, political messaging in that speech, and you could see the outline of whether he comes to it accidentally because it's thrust upon him or by design at some point. A general election, you feel very much when you listen to him there, is on his mind. He emphasised not only the domestic agenda, which he restlessly sort of rattled out, got so many things he wants to do. He knows he won't be able to do any of them unless Brexit is dealt with. And on Brexit, really keen to make sure that he doesn't get painted as the man who wants no deal. If it happens on his watch, he wants it to be all Europe's fault.
And what can we learn from the appointment so far? Particularly intriguing Priti Patel at the Home Office as somebody who not so long ago believed in the death penalty.
Well, there's a number of people like Priti Patel who are coming back into government having resigned or been sacked. It's almost some sort of the second coming for some of these people, second chance, you feel. I think the other thing you learn is that he was willing to be ruthless on his first day. Jeremy Hunt tried to do a face-off with him and say, actually, I want to keep the job I've got or something better, and he faced him down. The two appointments I think that most people are talking about, though, are Sajid Javid going to the Treasury, to number 11. What Boris Johnson has always been fixated about is the idea that the Treasury was a great block to the sort of Brexit he thought this country should have. And added to Sajid Javid, who presumably has said exactly, repeated that exact message to Boris Johnson in order to get that job, is the hiring of Dominic Cummings, the man who was at the epicentre of the Vote Leave campaign, who 3 years ago probably thought he was going to come into number 10 with Boris Johnson back then, is now in number 10. He takes a very dim view not only of the Treasury, but also of the whole of Whitehall. And that has sent real shockwaves through buildings here. First they heard about it was today. Certain appointments get leaked in a little bit earlier. But this is how the day went when Boris Johnson announced himself as Prime Minister to this country. A top-end government limo purrs the new Prime Minister to Buckingham Palace. But our turbulent politics even intruded on this traditional image. Police cleared the environmental protesters away. The convoy speeded up, and moments later, Boris Johnson was in Buckingham Palace shaking hands with the Queen. This, the moment he becomes Prime Minister. The Queen having been advised that he can command a majority of MPs. It's a disputable piece of advice. His challenge is to prove the doubters wrong. In the middle of a stormy night, pro-Remain protesters projected their message onto Buckingham Palace. Past Remainers jeering and Brexiteers cheering at the gates, he was driven into Downing Street. Boris Johnson's first address to the nation as Prime Minister began with traditional language his predecessors would have recognised.
I have just been to see Her Majesty the Queen, who has invited me to form a government, and I have accepted.
But then it was off into his distinctive columnist's grabby phrase-making style.
The doubters, the doomsters, the gloomsters, they are going to get it wrong again. The people who bet against Britain are going to lose their shirts because we're going to restore trust in our democracy. And we're going to fulfill the repeated promises of Parliament to the people and come out of the EU on October the 31st. No ifs or buts.
His partner, Carrie Symonds, watched alongside the new team of advisers as he talked up the possibility of him negotiating a new deal with the EU better than Theresa May's. But if that didn't work...
And it is, of course, vital at the same time that we prepare for the remote possibility that Brussels refuses any further to negotiate. and we are forced to come out with no deal. Not because we want that outcome, of course not.
His team believes no deal must be painted as something forced on the UK by the stubbornness of the EU, not a choice he made. In what sounded like a draft election manifesto, he poured out domestic policy aims, knowing little can actually be done before the Brexit boulder is moved.
We level up across Britain with higher wages, a higher living wage, higher productivity. We close the opportunity gap, giving millions of young people the chance to own their own homes.
He'd started by paying tribute to Theresa May's fortitude. He ended with what sounded like a damning verdict on her time in office.
And after 3 years of unfounded self-doubt, it is time to change the record, to recover our natural and historic role as an enterprising, outward-looking and truly global Britain, generous in temper and engaged with the world. No one in the last few centuries has succeeded in betting against the pluck and nerve and ambition of this country. They will not succeed today. We, in this government, will work flat out to give this country the leadership it deserves. And that work begins now.
There was a brief wave on the doorstep, and then he was clapped in to number 10 by many of the staff who clapped out Theresa May a couple of hours beforehand. Many were still adjusting to one job announcement that rocked this building this morning like no other. Dominic Cummings not dressing up for his first day in his new job as top advisor to the Prime Minister. He's one of a number of staff from the Vote Leave campaign team joining Boris Johnson in number 10. But Dominic Cummings, seen here ducking out of the picture, glimpsed here in his glass office, and here celebrating Leave's victory, was the mastermind of the campaign.
No, the fight for Britain really does begin.
As portrayed in Channel 4's Brexit drama.
We can tap into all these little wells of resentment, all these little pressures that have been building up, ignored over time.
Dominic Cummings has said Whitehall could be cut by 90% and is populated by stodgy-brained mediocrities. He's directed similar abuse at many Conservative MPs, including fellow Brexiteers. Boris Johnson would have been making his job a bit easier if he hadn't hired someone who called you incompetent, David Davis thick as pig mince, and basically said the civil service, as it stands at the moment, should probably be wiped out.
Well, all I can say is he's there to do one thing and one thing only, and whatever people say in their time when they're not in government, I don't really pay much attention to. What I pay attention to is, are they going to be good at what they do? What is the job? Leave on by the 31st.
There's no more excuses now, are there? You know, the band are back together again from 2016. It's now around their necks to sort this out, and there are no easy solutions here.
Do you think there could be a vote of no confidence this autumn if he looks like he's moving towards no deal, and he could lose it?
Yes and yes.
Of the 9 candidates who ran against Boris Johnson for the Tory leadership, 4 looked like getting a place in his new team, including Sajid Javid, the new Chancellor, and Dominic Raab, the new Foreign Secretary. From the Prime Minister, Ian Duncan-Smith helped to chase from office, at her last question time, a flick of the tail at Jeremy Corbyn.
Perhaps I could just finish my exchange with him by saying this. As a party leader who has accepted when her time was up, perhaps the time is now for him to do the same.
He knows he survived David Cameron giving him the same blunt message when he left office 3 years ago. Theresa May was applauded out of a House of Commons that has inflicted record-breaking defeats on her Brexit plan. As she left Downing Street, there was a more coded flick of the tail at Boris Johnson. She believes a no-deal Brexit could lead to the breakup of the United Kingdom.
Of course, much remains to be done. The immediate priority being to complete our exit from the European Union in a way that works for the whole United Kingdom.
And then protest broke in on the proceedings again, a distant cry of "Stop Brexit."
Finally, and most of all, I want to thank my husband, Philip, who's been my greatest supporter and my closest companion.
That wasn't me.
I think the answer to that is, I think not.
Her time was over. Likewise, most of her top ministerial team. This was Boris Johnson returning to number 10 this evening from Parliament after a couple of hours of face-to-face meetings, killing off the cabinet careers of minister after minister. At least 16 people who sat around Theresa May's cabinet table won't be sitting around his. Boris Johnson may find he's added to potential rebellions on his backbenches. That advice to the Queen that got him the job, he can command a majority in the House, could look very shaky by the autumn.
And Gary Gibbons still with me, with his ear to the door and his eye also to the door. And what have you learned?
Well, we've got another appointment. The Vote Leave gang is reassembled truly now, because Michael Gove, who of course had this massive falling out with Boris Johnson way back in 2016 when he withdrew support for Boris Johnson's leadership attempt then, he's been given the role that David Lidington had under Theresa May, the enforcer, the progress chaser, a very influential role potentially. And of course, Dominic Cummings, who I was talking about earlier, is the guy who used to work for him. This triangle is reassembled. We've also just seen Theresa Villiers, one of the other ministers who walked out of here 3 years ago to go and join the Leave campaign, signed the placard and the rest of it. She's just walked in. We don't know what job she's got yet.
Gary, we'll be back with you again soon at some point in the programme. Joining me now from Westminster is the Conservative MP and Chairman of the Pro-Brexit European Research Group, Jacob Rees-Mogg. He's widely tipped for a job in Boris Johnson's new cabinet. So, Mr Rees-Mogg, have you got your phone turned on? Let's get that clear for a start.
No, there's no reception where I am. I was trying to get the cricket score because England wasn't doing very well. And in this little studio I'm in, I can't even get that.
Come. The rumour mill here is rife with all sorts of ideas, not least Leader of the House. Heard any of that?
I've heard rumours, but I haven't heard anything from the Prime Minister, which is where these things come from, so I'm not counting any chickens.
Now, was it a good idea for him to sack his rival, Jeremy Hunt?
I'm surprised that Jeremy Hunt didn't accept the Secretary of State for Defence role. It seems to me that is a role of enormous importance. We are facing serious problems at the moment with Iran. It's one of the most prestigious and important jobs in government, and Jeremy Hunt's campaign had as a major plank of it increasing defence expenditure. So I'm absolutely puzzled as to why Mr Hunt would have turned down such an important post.
He's nailed his colours to a 99-day deadline to deliver Brexit, with or without a deal. I mean, what happens if he doesn't get it? Is that it? He resigns or calls an election?
He's got to do it. Delivering by the 31st of October was the central plank of his leadership campaign. He is bound in by that date. It fulfills the mandate from the referendum result and from the general election. And Boris Johnson simply has to deliver departure, with or without a deal, by the 31st of October. There isn't a plan B.
Now, Michael Gove has just strode past me. Very difficult to tell from the stride, although it was hugely confident. I would say it looks as if he got the job he wanted, which obviously is very close to Boris Johnson. Are you pleased about that?
Oh, I think it's a very good appointment. It shows two things. One, the magnanimity of Boris Johnson, which is an important quality in a Prime Minister, and also his wisdom in bringing in such an effective and competent minister as Michael Gove.
But the cost is dear. I mean, he's had to sack 17 people, and neither David Cameron nor Mrs May ever got anywhere near doing that.
Reshuffles are an unpleasant business, and within that 17 are personal friends of mine who I'm obviously sorry have left government, but Prime Ministers have to form a team that they feel will deliver for them and for the country. It is the sad reality of politics.
Now I just see Mr Williamson going past, the sacked Minister of Defence, but Secretary of State for Defence. Would you like to see him back in that old office?
I don't think he's going to be Secretary of State for Defence, but I think he is going back in from the rumour mill that I've been reading about and hearing about.
Now, what do you think the appointment of Dominic Cummings heralds? Not least because although he ran the Leave campaign, and therefore the alliance is natural, is he somebody who should be at the heart of number 10, where he's in a very key position, given that he was held in contempt of the House of Commons?
I think it is a good appointment. He's an enormously intelligent and capable man, a very driven man. He understands how to use the levers of power, and Boris Johnson will need to use the levers of power in the next 99 days. So I think it is a good appointment. And the contempt of the House of Commons had no consequences. There was no penalty other than a censure, and therefore that is effectively a spent issue.
You had a splinter group, the ERG, within the party, but now from outside the party, we have Nigel Farage bidding to have an electoral pact with the Conservative Party. Is that something which would bring you joy?
Well, it's a very hard question for you to ask me, because I have a strong electoral pact with my youngest sister, Annunziata, and that is to say I always wish her well in all her endeavours and think the people in the East Midlands are very well represented by her. But a formal pact between the two parties is something I think is unlikely, because if we deliver Brexit by the 31st of October, then what could the pact be about? And if we don't deliver Brexit by the 31st of October, why on earth would they go into a pact with us?
Now, you're experienced in these things. Does the fact that you can present to the country a whole array of new faces doing new jobs, does that perhaps herald the likelihood of an election?
I think with no majority, it is highly unlikely that this Parliament will survive until 2022, but I don't think this is all being set up for an early election. But the whole tone of the government is encouraging, enthusiastic. The new Prime Minister, Mr. Johnson's speech on the steps of Downing Street was just uplifting, and I think that's really important, that we should feel something's changed. It's not just grey business as usual.
Well, that does sound as if the election is coming, as far as you're concerned.
Well, I think the government could lose a vote of confidence. That's not an impossibility, and that would lead pretty much automatically to an election. There is no majority, and there are some Conservative MPs who indicate they're not likely to support the government. On the other hand, the Fixed Term Parliament Act doesn't leave it in the Prime Minister's gift anymore. It's worth remembering that. An election will not happen because Boris Johnson decides to have one, but it may happen by accident.
Jacob Rees-Mogg, needless to say, Downing Street is agog to find out what job you get, but thank you in the meantime
Thank you
for
so
joining
much.
us. All the best.
Thank you. Bye.
Over now to Cathy, who's outside Parliament.
Thanks, John. Well, Boris Johnson is, of course, nothing if not a controversial choice for Prime Minister. And it is fair to say that whichever way people think about him, they have a strong opinion. As the climate activist slowed his car on the way to Buckingham Palace earlier, they weren't the only ones protesting. In London and Liverpool, many people against Mr. Johnson were also making their voices heard. Well, the new Prime Minister likes his classical analogies, so here's one for him. He faces a Herculean task, as our North of England correspondent Claire Fallon now reports.
In Labour-loyal Liverpool, you'd expect little love for a Conservative Prime Minister. But with this Prime Minister, feelings run even deeper. What do you think of our new Prime Minister?
Well, I can't say that on camera.
Not a fan, then?
No.
What would happen if Boris Johnson came to Liverpool now?
I think there'd be, like, trouble in the streets.
Go back 15 years. Boris Johnson was a Tory backbencher and also editor of The Spectator when he was ordered by his party leader to come to Liverpool to say sorry.
I'm apologising, obviously, for all the offence I've caused and for any hurt that people feel.
He'd published an article on the reaction to the murder of Ken Bigley, an engineer from Liverpool who was kidnapped and beheaded in Iraq. The article claimed many Liverpudlians wallow in victimhood. On Hillsborough, he talked about the role of drunken fans trying to fight their way into the ground, which is staggeringly offensive, but also not true. And that's not the only reason people are out protesting about the new Prime Minister.
Boris Johnson is a liar!
And at the gates of Downing Street, but there were also Brexit supporters welcoming the new PM.
We want Boris! We want Boris!
And even in Liverpool, some have forgiven him. Tony Caldera runs a cushion factory on Merseyside. He's a Liverpool season ticket holder and a Boris Johnson backer.
I hope that he's actually going to be good for the city region, good for the north of England, and this optimism and energy that he's going to bring will hopefully get Brexit over the line, and that's got to be good for cities like Liverpool.
But for many, the anger is still there. Marie and Tracy are mother and daughter, divided on Brexit, but united on the new PM.
Wow, say no more.
You'd have to bleep it out, definitely have to bleep it out.
We was at an old age pensioners club yesterday, and the girl, the announcer who sort of runs it all, she says, Boris Johnson is now, the boos were unbelievable.
Yeah.
For some, today is no cause for celebration, only more anger.
Claire Fallon reporting there. And by the way, if you're annoyed by that dingy-dongy xylophone noise, apologies, we're quite annoyed by it too. And the singing. So some breaking news now. The former Security Minister, Ben Wallace, is the new Defence Secretary, and we'll bring you more of all those new appointments and sackings as we get them. Well, earlier I spoke to the new leader of the Liberal Democrats, Jo Swinson, and I began by asking her whether she was one of the people betting against Britain, who the new Prime Minister had railed against outside number 10.
I'm batting for Britain. I know that Britain's best future is in the European Union, and I've always believed that, and it's still what I believe, and it's still what I'm fighting for.
But the optimism might be catching. That might work, mightn't it?
Well, I'm optimistic, but not about Boris Johnson. You know, I think we can create a much better country. We can transform our economy so that it works for people and planet. Boris Johnson is not the man to do that. We can't trust him to do it. He doesn't have the detail and the seriousness to do it. It's the Liberal Democrats who can do that, and that's what my leadership is going to be about.
Looks like quite a wholesale clear-out. People like Dominic Cummings, the former boss of Vote Leave, coming in. What do you think of that?
Well, I mean, I think, frankly, bringing in somebody like Dominic Cummings with his record, not just in terms of how he acts within government, but obviously his sort of general disregard for the truth, if we think back to that campaign in 2016, doesn't really bode well for what a Boris Johnson Prime Ministership is going to look like.
Now, he said he's going to come up with a new deal, a better deal from the EU on Brexit. Will you at least consider backing that deal on the basis that it might be better than a sort of more perilous leaving without a deal?
There's no Brexit that can protect British jobs, that can protect our environment, that can protect our public services, our national security. You know, it doesn't matter what kind of badge you put on it, Brexit is bad for Britain.
Okay, so in your new role then, will you be using your clout to bring forward a parliamentary attempt to revoke Article 50 at the earliest opportunity?
Well, we believe the best way to stop Brexit is through a people's vote, to give people the final say between a specific Brexit deal, and if that's one that Boris, negotiates. I mean, I think there's a degree of arrogance there that he thinks he can do in 99 days what Theresa May didn't manage in 3 years, but if he can, well, then that should be put to the British people.
But you didn't get that under Theresa May, so you might not get it under Boris Johnson. Will you try and use Parliament to revoke Article 50 if you believe every Brexit is bad?
If we're about to crash out without a deal on the 31st of October, then absolutely, to avoid that scenario, revoking Article 50 should very much be on the table. But I think the better thing to do is to secure a people's vote and to build that majority.
You've also ruled out joining any kind of coalition government with Jeremy Corbyn or Boris Johnson at the helm. What does either of those two men need to do to get Lib Dem votes for their first Queen's speech after a general election?
Neither of them is fit to be Prime Minister.
So you would refuse to back their Queen's speech under any circumstances?
Both of them are Brexiteers, right? I mean, obviously, Boris is saying it's do or die. He's going to take us out, even if it's a catastrophic no-deal exit.
And Jeremy Corbyn wants a second referendum too, which you do.
Hang on.
He'd deny he was a Brexiteer, absolutely.
Well, he might deny it, but actions speak louder than words. If he had campaigned in 2016 with anything like the energy that he put into the 2017 campaign, we probably would have had a different result in the referendum. So Jeremy Corbyn has proven time and again he can hardly even bring himself to say the words people's vote.
How does that stack up with what you've said, that this is the time for working together, not the time for tribalism? It seems to me you're a very tribal politician.
Not at all. I am working with people on the backbenches in the Conservative Party, in the Labour Party, in the Scottish National Party, who I fight tooth and nail in my own seat of Eastern Bartonshire because we disagree on independence. But we agree on stopping Brexit and securing a people's vote, and so we work together on that. There's plenty of people in both Labour and the Conservatives who I actually find it very easy to work with.
Jo Swinson, thank you very much. Well, I'm joined now by Jill Rutter, a former civil servant who's now at the Institute for Government, also the former Conservative MP and columnist Matthew Parris, and Ian Martin, also a columnist at The Times and editor of the website Reaction. Matthew Parris, let's just talk about the scale of this cabinet cull first. Can you remember anything more vicious?
I can't remember anything more vicious, and I can't remember anything more random, shapeless or pointless.
Give me an example.
Carnage can be necessary in politics, but it has to be carnage with a purpose. This just seems to be destructive, as though he's sat in a room on his own with a piece of paper, crossing names out of people that he doesn't care for. I don't see this as the composition of a government. I see it more as the decomposition of the last government.
Ian Martin, would you agree, or do you see a point to it?
I disagree, actually, with Matthew. I think the point is that he's not building a government for the long term. He's not trying to construct a 2 or 3 or 4 year administration. This is about the mess that he's in, and it's rooted in an understanding that he probably only really has 3 or 4 months. He might be forced into an early general election. I think that's pretty much inevitable, earlier than people think.
And even though he's ruled it out?
He's ruled it out, but Boris rules a lot of things out and then does them. But I think knowing that, you look at where he's placed Dominic Cummings,
his senior advisor at number 10.
Advisor, Michael Gove back in as the sort of linchpin in the cabinet office role, and the way in which he's been absolutely brutal, shedding people from cabinet. It looks to me like the action of a politician who wants to send that classic message, change, that this isn't just a reshuffle, this is a new government.
So Jill Rutter, how will the civil service, not always that good with change, how will they deal with Boris?
Well, most of them won't have to deal with Boris. They'll have to deal with whoever's been sent to them as a new minister. As if we're seeing, most government departments will have a new Secretary of State tonight. There's very little continuity there, so they'll be preparing for that. I think one of the things they will be worried about, they'll be interested to see what Dominic Cummings does at number 10, because obviously he's been quite hard on the senior civil service before.
Yes, he's had some awful things to say about them, hasn't he? He said that, there'd be a leak on the news and you'd see on the screen latest Gove disaster when he was working for Michael Gove. Then you look through the glass screen and see the official responsible for it in the lift, pottering home at 3:30 in the afternoon.
Yeah, well, Dominic Cummings got a bit of a reputation, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, how much contact he actually has with the civil service. I think the other thing that civil servants will be a bit worried about, there's that much change, but actually there's a very tight deadline for the 31st of October. You could have made that an argument for stability rather than change. And some of that language from the Prime Minister in his speech about, predictors of disaster, gloom mongers, people will be sitting there and saying, well, if we go and tell the new minister that actually no deal's not going to be a piece of cake or walk in the park, what reaction am I going to get? And I think that's going to be one of the things on a lot of civil servants' minds this evening.
Matthew Parris, do you think this does point to an earlier general election?
Yes. This can't survive. He's just got a whole lot of new enemies, and some that he didn't need to make. He's going to lose a no confidence motion before the 31st of October.
Yeah, but he might win an election.
That would be, if he's going to lose a no confidence motion, then you don't wait to lose it. You call the election beforehand. You stay on the front foot. And that's what I would do if I were him.
But there is a problem that he's ruled that out, hasn't he? Specifically to his MPs in there.
I don't think that Boris has ruled something out has ever been a problem in his life in any sphere.
Ian Martin, how easy is it for Boris Johnson to win an election, do you think?
It's extremely difficult. I mean, if you look at the dispensation in the polls, you're dealing with four-party politics. But he doesn't really have any easy options. Yeah. It's not as though there's an option that he can choose that guarantees 3 years of stability and a peaceful Brexit and harmony in the country. If he is going to be forced into an election, or he's going to be destroyed by the people in this place over there, there is an argument for him saying, well, at least own the situation, lean into it, and say, look, the European Union isn't cooperating, Parliament isn't cooperating, let's settle this once and for all. I suspect that'll be his pitch.
He's brutally putting together a government very, very quickly. He obviously wants to move quickly, he's in a hurry. Can he move quicker on Brexit than people have predicted? Is it any more deliverable under Boris Johnson?
I'm not sure the deliverability changes, but I think there is one thing that changed, and I thought it was very interesting in his speech, was when he talked about lack of decisions over the last 3 years. And what he is doing, and I don't totally agree with Matthew that there's no message from the cabinet reshuffle. This is, in a sense, he's creating a unity cabinet. So he is taking out the people who might have dissented from his approach. So clearly doesn't want a cabinet where they have long, languid discussions about what do we do. This is a cabinet which everybody in it owes their position to him. So he's in a position of maximum authority. And I think he won't suffer from the sort of divisions within his cabinet that so beset Theresa May, certainly since the 2017 election. So I think he can move quicker there. The difficult side is obviously that doesn't necessarily cut much ice in Europe, and that's the counterparty to any sort of negotiated deal.
Comparisons will be made with Harold Macmillan's Knight of the Long Knives.
Knight of the Blonde Knives.
Yes, and not very happy comparisons, because Macmillan didn't last very long after that.
But you're a Brexiteerian, Martin. Do you feel that Brexit is now within reach, as Boris Johnson promises it is?
Within reach? I'm not sure I'd be that optimistic about it. How I feel about it is that this crisis has become interminable, and what's positive about what's happening today, I think lots of people have reservations about Boris Johnson, is that it is going to be brought to a head, at least. One way or the other, there is going to be something closer to clarity. Britain's either going to be out in the autumn or by Christmas, or it's not going to be, and it's going to collapse into some form of coalition. But this idea of this endless, interminable crisis that cannot be broken, he's essentially trying to break that. And it's a big gamble, what I think he's about to do, but it might work.
I just want to ask Matthew Paris Remainer very, very briefly, are you more optimistic tonight that you might be able to reverse Brexit,
Yes.
you and your ilk?
Yeah, yep. he looks flawed and weak to me.
Well, rubbish, they said in the crowd. Thank you for putting up with the noise. I could barely hear you, Ian, but I hope I deciphered you correctly. Thanks very much. Back to John now in Downing Street.
Bye, John. Welcome back to Downing Street. Well, Brussels will have been watching Prime Minister Boris Johnson's first speech right outside number 10 here extremely carefully. Today, the EU's chief negotiator, Michael Barnier, said he's looking forward to hearing what Boris Johnson wants, but that a no-deal scenario would never be the choice of the EU. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent Jonathan Rugman joins us now, live from Brussels. Jonathan.
John, I think it's fair to say that Boris Johnson's first speech as Prime Minister has gone down like a lead balloon in Brussels, because he has repeated what is now his red line, which is that the UK is leaving on October the 31st with or without a deal. And so we saw a letter from Donald Tusk, the President of the European Council, to Boris Johnson, congratulating him on getting the job, but then adding this stiletto of a sentence: I look forward to meeting you to discuss in detail our cooperation. Now that in detail suggests that Mr. Tusk thinks Mr. Johnson is full of hot air, that he needs a reality check, that he thinks he needs to think really hard about what a no-deal Brexit really means. And then this morning, the Brexit Steering Committee of MEPs met and produced a statement which flatly contradicted the new Prime Minister. They reaffirmed their commitment to the withdrawal agreement, that is the current agreement, and they pointed out that the UK government has agreed that the agreement cannot be reopened. The MEPs saying that they're only open to considering changes to the political declaration, that is some new words about the Irish backstop, without actually deleting it. And finally, they warn that talk of a no deal has greatly increased the risk of a disorderly exit of the UK. So a game of chicken has begun between London and Brussels, a game of blink, if you like. And on this side, they are saying they simply will not blink, that the withdrawal agreement is going to stay pretty much the same. And so officials here are looking at a variety of scenarios, the scenarios you've been discussing, a possible extension of the UK's membership of the EU, a possible vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister in Parliament, followed by a general election, or even preceded by a general election. But what they are not talking about at the moment is striking a deal with Boris Johnson. That seems the least likely of the options now available.
Jonathan Rugman in Brussels. Well, now, during that speech on the steps of number 10, Mr. Johnson sent a message to what he called his Irish friends. Tonight, the Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, was the first European leader to invite Mr. Johnson to a one-to-one meeting. Joining me now from Dublin is the columnist for the Irish Times, Fintan O'Toole. Fintan O'Toole, before we get to the politics, what about the man? I mean, what does Ireland make of the upper class charm. How does it translate over there?
I don't think anybody in Ireland is particularly charmed. You know, Boris Johnson is something we haven't really seen before, which is usually when anybody starts out as British Prime Minister, you know, there's an assumption of goodwill. You may get disillusioned over time, but at least you start with some illusions. The strange thing with Boris Johnson is nobody has any illusions about him. The people who voted for him have no illusions about his mendacity and his recklessness. And of course, nobody in Ireland has any illusions either. He's not seen as a figure who takes anything seriously. I mean, look at his very inapt joke in his first speech as Prime Minister, making a joke about never mind the backstop, I'll be the bookstop. You know, this kind of stuff. You know, how can anybody have any great faith that this is someone who even takes the issues seriously, never mind has any kind of plan for dealing with them?
But was there a single moment that provided the remotest hope?
Well, you know, the only remote hope you might say, of course, is to use the word remote himself about, in his view, the possibility that, as he put it, the European Union would refuse to negotiate with him. Is that trying to give himself some kind of wriggle room by saying this is a very remote hope? And is he saying, what does he mean by negotiation? You know, I think the way most people in Ireland would see it is that he's kind of laid out a certain kind of strategy, which is a bluff strategy, right? It's a strategy of saying, if we threaten no deal and look like we're really serious about it, it will never get to that. Hence Johnson saying there's a 1 in a million chance of it happening. Now, this strategy, and it's not much of a strategy, but it's based on an idea somehow that Ireland and the European Union is going to be scared by big bad Boris. And I don't think that's going to happen. What's going to happen is, I think everybody will talk to him, the Taoiseach will talk to him, Brussels will talk to him, and what they'll say to him is, look, you know, at what point do you believe we mean what we say? How often do we have to say the withdrawal agreement is not going to be reopened? Now, can we talk about what might help you, what might allow you to say that there's some progress has been made? If you want to regard that as negotiation, whereby you could put some new language in the political declaration, whereby you could, for example, maybe set up an international commission to look at alternatives to checks on the border, these wonderful technological solutions which we haven't seen so far. If he wants those kinds of things, I've absolutely no doubt that the Irish government would be absolutely delighted and that the Europeans would be delighted. But that's not what his rhetoric has been promising. And I think this is where, you know, most people are very concerned that, you know, what he was saying in his speech today was, you know, he's still going on about two completely incompatible things. He said, on the one hand, there are no circumstances in which there will be checks on the border. And on the other hand, he's talking about a very hard Brexit in which Britain leaves the customs union and the single market, which involves, of course, checks on the border. And if he's not willing to face up to the fact that these two things are incompatible, it's very hard to know how you begin to seriously negotiate with somebody like that.
I'm wondering, Fintan, how Britain looks today from Ireland. After all, you've looked across the Irish sea, not you personally, but for centuries. And I'm just wondering, are you seeing a diminished Britain? Or are you seeing a stubborn Britain? Or are you seeing a rather hopeful Britain? I detect probably not that.
Not particularly hopeful. You know, to be honest, there's absolutely no schadenfreude. There's no glee here. There's an enormous sadness. You know, where I'm standing now in Dublin is very close to where Queen Elizabeth gave a wonderful speech and a wonderful reception in 2011, you know, which we all saw as a historic moment. All of this bitterness, all of this very, very nasty relationship between Ireland and Britain, that was over. We were into a new era of genuine friendship. I mean, people genuinely felt, and there was enormous relief about this. And I think there's enormous sadness now at the fact that, you know, while Ireland has been trying to deal with its historic problems, Britain seems to be stuck, and Boris Johnson is an embodiment of this, you know, in attitudes towards the past, which have, you know, undergone a kind of strange resurgence. You know, he's still talking in his speech today about British pluck. you know, for God's sake, it's like we're still fighting the Second World War and we're never going to be defeated. You know, this is not real, and there is a sadness that you look at Britain and that this is what's going on.
Fenton O'Toole, lyrical, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you from Dublin. Now, today does mark 99 days until Boris Johnson vows Britain will Brexit. No ifs, no buts. Until that day, Channel 4 News' fact-check team is going to examine every single public statement made by the new Prime Minister, and we need your help. If you see a claim made by Boris Johnson or any other senior politician that you think needs scrutiny, please tweet it to @factcheck, and our team will surely look into it.